Seriously though, thank you, Arda, so much for the invitation, and thank you to all four of you guys for being here. It's a wonderful honor. I got here last night from San Francisco, and it's always exciting to be in Istanbul. So I do welcome, and I'm excited about the direct flight when that happens. But until then, we'll just keep on coming. So the topic of the panel today is to talk a little bit about venture capital, and perhaps even demystify a little bit how all of this works. But just first of all, to give the panel an idea, I'm going to ask you guys, the audience, a question. How many people in the audience are a founder or work for a startup? And how many people in the audience have had an experience trying to raise money from an angel investor or a venture capitalist? Okay, so a lot of the front row, you guys all came up and sat near the front. Good job. Well, great. So we're gonna go through a few different things today about how this whole business works, and we're really lucky to have some fantastic investors with different perspectives, I think, on the ecosystem. So I like this sort of surround couch system we're using here. So I'll sit in the middle and try to direct questions to you guys. But starting out, and Michiel, we'll let you start. Sort of just an introduction. Tell the audience sort of, you know, your name, your hometown, where you're coming from here, and then where do you invest in sort of in the chain? Is it early? Is it Series A? Kind of what kind of an investor are you, if you don't mind starting?
Yeah, so not only my last name is hard, but my first name too is Michiel.
Michiel, okay.
Thank you very much.
Got it.
And that's because I'm originally Dutch. I live in London now with Accel. Accel is a global fund. We have offices in San Francisco, in London, where we cover all of Europe, in China, and in India. I grew up as an entrepreneur myself. I had to knock on about 100 doors before we managed to raise capital, because we raised capital at the end of the bubble. So I know how painful the experience is, and I think an important thing is to have a good match between what you try to achieve and who you try to get money from. What we try to do is really invest in companies that have the potential to be global winners. And whether we invest in a very early stage or at a relatively late stage is not that important to us. So in general, we cover the whole spectrum, and what we prefer to do is to get you to know you very early, because our average holding period of an investment is 8 years. So you want to really make sure that you see eye to eye, that you trust each other, that you have the same idea of kind of what would mean success in a certain company. So we encourage people to come to us very early on.
Great. That's a great start. And have you guys made any investments in Turkey yet?
We have been very close, but we haven't. But we have a team of 12 investors in our London office, and everyone has been to Turkey multiple times. So we recently raised a new fund of almost $500 million, and Russia and Turkey as growth markets within Europe are our prime focus.
That's great. And that new fund is $500 million with a B.
$500 million with a B.
Okay, so they got a little bit of money to invest. Pawel.
Hi. So hey, I'm Pawel from Point 9 Capital. We're based in Berlin. We're early stage seed and small Series A fund. We invest up to €1 million in the first step. And we've been doing it for a couple of years. We started in 2009. And we focus on companies that are based in Europe. So Europe is, as a whole, is what we focus on. And in two spaces primarily. So we have a strong focus on online software, also known as SaaS. And we like marketplace type of companies. And we get involved pretty early, maybe not as early as an idea, but as soon as we have a prototype and something that is working and is generating first traction, as we call it, we get very interested. And in some cases, we also invest beyond Europe. Yeah, that's, I think, it in a nutshell.
Okay, fantastic. Sina.
I'm Sina from Istanbul. I'm one of the 3 co-founders of Markafoni. We launched 5 years ago, then we expanded to Ukraine and Australia, etc. And since a certain time, I'm an early stage angel investor, and I'm investing into lifestyle and fashion, Turkey and all across Europe. whatever the concept is. So marketplace, classifieds, e-commerce, whatever.
So you have made some investments in Turkey?
Yes, and also outside of Turkey.
Okay. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Jozsef.
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me. So my name is Jozsef Köver. I am partner with 3TS Capital Partners. I am personally based in Budapest, Hungary, of all places, but do cover a lot of countries during my investment work. 3TS Capital Partners is covering with its investment activities mostly Central Eastern Europe. We don't cover Russia, but cover basically new EU countries, ex-Yugoslavia. We cover Turkey, we cover Austria, kind of pulling that into our region, and have been doing that for over a decade now. In terms of investment stages, earlier we were focusing mostly on earlier stage investments, but as things were going quite okay, we were able to raise our next fund. Just recently we announced that the first closing of that was 103 million euros, so almost 140 in dollars. And with that fund, we will be moving towards making growth investments. So rather than earlier stage ones, Series A ones, it's more like B-ish. Let's put it this way. We can call it B-ish, this part of the world. As far as Turkey is concerned, we have been coming to this market and trying to cover the country for quite some years now. And we made one investment, which is called Achieved, a premium dating platform, market leading, great team, great company. We are very happy with it. And as we have the new fund, we're now expanding our activities into Turkey more systematically, and we are just in the process of opening up our office in Istanbul and looking forward to do 3-4 investments in Turkey, growth stage investments in Turkey from the new fund.
Great, exciting. Well, thank you for that, and thank you all you guys for being here. Just by brief introduction, my role with Endeavor, which operates here in Turkey and in 15 other emerging markets around the world, is actually based out in Silicon Valley to help a lot of our portfolio companies raise money from great investors like these guys. So over the last 3 years, Endeavor worldwide has helped about 70 companies raise just over $300 million in equity capital from leading venture capitalists and growth equity firms. So that's kind of been my universe in my life for the last few years, and it's a lot of fun to be up here with great friends and investors like this panel. So let's get a little bit into, I guess, starting with why exactly are we here? We'll start, Pawel, over here with you and Michiel. Why Turkey? I mean, what is exciting? You're in Berlin. It's this very, happening place. Why did you take time this week to leave Berlin and come to Istanbul?
So, I mean, you're right. We're very excited about being in Berlin, and there's a lot of good stuff happening there. It's becoming the kind of center of gravity for Europe. But what we also see these days is that all around Berlin, so all around Europe, including Turkey, there is a lot of kind of sub-centers for tech entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And, be it Warsaw, Barcelona, Paris, or Istanbul, there is a lot of stuff going on all around the place. And it's our ambition to have a good understanding of all those sub-ecosystems, as I would describe it. And Istanbul is one of those that I was very keen to explore beyond what we have already known from the past.
Okay. Michiel, building on the same question, you mentioned all the folks from the London office of Accel have been to Turkey. What are you guys the most excited about from a sector perspective or a market perspective? What are you interested in?
I think the nice thing is, and Dave said it earlier, the world's become flat. Tech innovation is cheap, so it can start everywhere, and there's platforms that help you scale globally and sell through marketplaces and through social networks all around. So the ingredients you need is ambition, experience, and clearly some sort of kind of savviness around technical products. And I think the nice thing in Turkey at this point is you've had the first generation of entrepreneurs who started 10, 12 years ago, like Yemek Sepeti, like Sahib, and like Gidi Gijar, that have now all achieved a lot of success. They serve as examples to young entrepreneurs. A lot of people have been trained and have been kind of getting experience in these companies. They serve as angel investors to kind of nurture good talent. So the nice thing is there's a big wave of things coming on. For us, the drawback is there's a lot of e-commerce, and a lot of the e-commerce tends to be local and not scale enough for us. So we're looking more at software investments. Payments is very big. And I think the secret weapon of Turkey is there's a lot of very talented Turks outside of Turkey. And so someone who's successful here and manages to tap into that either by bringing talent back or using these channels to scale globally, those are kind of interesting people to follow.
And adding on the e-commerce part, I think what we have seen in Germany a couple of years ago, that it was all about e-commerce, and right now people are starting kind of focusing more on software, more international stuff. I think the same is happening in Turkey, maybe with a little bit of a delay, but after a big e-commerce wave, we are starting to see more and more kind of globally ambitious software entrepreneurs, which is interesting.
Sina, is that consistent with what you're seeing, I guess, as an angel, the things that are coming through your office and across your desk?
I think Turkey is a special country. Maybe I can explain it why I'm an early stage investor, and maybe why Accel is not still in Turkey. You know, if you look at the Turkish internet, you see 8 companies making more than $100 million of revenues. 8. 6 of them have strategic investors. So the first league is almost gone for investments. So later stage is difficult. Then you have a second league, let me put it that way, between let's say 10 million and 100 million. There are maybe 40 to 45 companies. At least half of them are occupied. They are subsidiaries of, you know, the bigger 8 companies. So what is happening in Turkey is, to get into the Turkish market, you have to go early stage. So the dilemma is, you know, if you are a big fund, the ticket size is too small there. So you bet your, you place your bet, and then you have to wait that they are growing, coming into the second, third league. So it's exciting because there's lots of going on in the third league. So anything between 0 and 10 million of revenues, but still the high end of Turkey is still limited. You know, there is only one big exit. So Gitti Gidiyor 2 years ago with 270 million. This is the highest rank if you compare it with any country around Turkey, Russia, Israel, or some Eastern European countries. It's still too small. I think the best times are ahead of us. We are just preparing.
I think it's a great perspective, and to pick up on that point about exits, I think that is an interesting thing for this panel to talk about a little bit. You know, Endeavor has looked at this also in Brazil and in Mexico and some other big markets where there's lots of investment money starting to go into the ecosystem, but I think there are still some questions as to where will the exits come from, whether it'll be a path of companies going public and being global or being acquired. Jozsef, we'll start with you. When you guys at 3TS look at Turkey, what's kind of your 10-year horizon on where you think some of the exits might come from for companies here?
Well, it depends. It depends on whether the local copycats, let's put it this way, the e-commerce companies and the various platforms, internet platforms, which in other countries have already developed quite well, will be scaling to the level where everybody believes they will be scaling to. Because they will be scaling, but over what period, I don't know. Because everything happens, but everything happens slower than you imagine. That is what I see in emerging markets. Everything happens, but everything happens much slower than you originally believed in. So, you know, again, in terms of exits, if the scale will not be there, then many of the exits will be just exits to local buyers, which is great. There is nothing wrong with that, nothing problematic with that. So that's the local part. If we are talking about companies which have global, regional, or more interestingly, global potential, obviously the exit will come from the big global players and mostly US players. That is what we see. Most of the buyers are US buyers at this point. Not exclusively, but most of the buyers are US buyers. I expect that to be the case going forward.
Michiel, Accel talks about being a partner to an entrepreneur or to a founding team for a long time. I think the average investment period is something like eight and a half years, you said?
They get really bored of us.
Do you guys think of exits at the beginning? Is that part of a conversation you have with founders when you're making an investment? Sort of like, where does this company go someday?
Yes, it's important both internally and externally. I think internally to our fund, we need to be convinced that there is an opportunity to exit a company, and that means that the space is strategic, that you potentially could IPO it. And I think to that point, when looking at some of the larger companies here in Turkey, I'm very convinced, and we spoke to a lot of the private equity funds and to the bigger banks here in the market, that there is a big opportunity for international IPOs for successful Turkish companies, like you've seen with Yandex, for example, in Russia.
Sure.
And I think the interesting thing is if you look at private equity, which is a field kind of a bit outside all of our realm, the multiples that are being paid in Turkey are extremely high, and that's not because there's big explosion like there's in tech from the underlyings, but because of the market growing and having a lot of potential, which is, I think, overall bodes well for exit. So yes, there's a big internal discussion, but it is also very important that that we and the entrepreneur are very aligned. What is the path you want to take the company on in case it's successful? So you run into our entrepreneurs who are super happy to kind of sell it at the first possible opportunity to one of the local champions, which could be a perfectly valid outcome, a perfectly great success for the individual entrepreneur, but which wouldn't fit our philosophy. So you rather kind of figure that out before you enter into a partnership together than afterwards. So yes, that is very important to have that frank discussion. And if it's not a fit, you can still stay good friends and introduce them to someone for whom it would be a good fit.
Sure. Pawel, how do you guys think about that for point 9?
About exits?
Yeah.
I think when you operate in this business in Europe, the exit things are different than in the US, that's for sure. And I think what we are trying to do, we're trying to help build businesses that are sustainable, good businesses, which means that once you have something that's working, an exit will eventually happen. So we don't try to invest in or support businesses with the thesis, this is a strategic field and someone will buy it no matter what happens. We try to support people who want to build good businesses. So that's one thing. And also in Europe, the exit landscape is very fragmented, as Europe is geographically. So it's relatively intransparent, but I think many transactions happen and will continue to happen. Right?
Sina, I'm interested in your perspective on when we think about Turkey, and obviously there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of upside. What is unique to Turkey on the challenges side? What's the hardest thing about Turkey versus Australia or some of these other places you've done business?
So in my opinion, there are two challenges in Turkey. The first one is the investment base is not very strong. So if you look, Turkey has maybe 50 business angels, maybe 70, but not more. Mm-hmm. And maybe there are 2 VCs, or 3 VCs who entirely invest into the internet.
Who are based here, you mean?
Who are based in Istanbul, who focus like 212, right?
Yep.
And this is for a country in the size of Turkey, it's too weak, right? If you look at Brazil, you have hundreds of business angels. You have really big VCs there, Brazilian VCs, but also foreign VCs. Yep. This is still a challenge, and Turkey has to overcome this. And this is also taking some time. Look, we are talking about Gitti Gidiyor and the exit to eBay. The story of Gitti Gidiyor started 2006. The exit was in 2011. So the exit story started in 2006. So some things will take some time, but there is no reason why Turkey will not get there, because the entire e-commerce in Turkey is 1% of the retail volume, non-food retail volume of Turkey. It's only
1%.
So in UK, it's 15, 16. In Germany, it's 14. In the US, it's around 13, 14. Let's jump Turkey to 6%, 8%. Everything what you have today will times 4, times 5 double itself. So the financial part is one structure. Turkey started still too late. The second thing is the investment culture. It's not the entrepreneurial culture, but the investment culture here. there are very few local investors who understand the dynamics of the, let's say, e-commerce. Many people expect I put once money and then this will be a big thing and then I will have a big exit. No, the regular stuff is if I'm an e-commerce company, I put money today, then in 6 months, then in 12 months, and I execute 3 years on the budgets. This is something culturally which needs to be more and more accepted in Turkey. This is really a challenge.
So I'm going to take your first point there and turn it to some of the other panelists. Jozsef, we'll come back to you, but I'll ask this couch first. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think the investment base from what you've seen in Turkey is sort of too small even to support the amount of things starting to happen here? When it comes to number of angels and kind of early stage local players?
Like looking from the outside, the number of VCs is limited, I think, but I think the key to development of every ecosystem, and I think it applies to many European countries, is that you get outside investors involved, because I think it's hard to develop a vibrant scene from within. You need to have, expertise, experience, connections from outside going into a country, and that's, I think, the best way to make a scene really rock. And I think in Turkey it's happening. So people are coming, like we're here, and I see a lot of interest for Turkey from people who haven't done business here, but they've seen the companies coming out and then they want to get involved. So I think it's a good sign for the development of the scene in the future. Right?
Interesting. Michiel, agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with the outside coming in, like similar to Brazil, that people stayed on the sidelines very long and then everyone wants to be in and doesn't know where to start and kind of pull back. So there is an important role of local trustworthy sources to put their kind of name and money behind investments like Sina, like some of your colleagues in the Ganata Business Angels. It's very important that you have local partners providing that role for foreign capital to kind of feel this trusted bond, and then you can help them locally on the ground and we can help them internationally, and there's a synergy that is really important. So I think I agree with Sina, there needs to be more of that, but I see a lot more now than there was 3 years ago, so I think it definitely moves in the right direction. And the second thing is the tendency of trying to do things through subsidiaries and family structures and conglomerates where, like you were saying before, a lot of the interesting kind of new experiments and new ideas are part of larger groups, so make it hard for outside investors to come in and support it. So that's an anomaly in the Turkish market that I think will over time change.
Jozsef?
Yeah, I fully agree with the notion that there is more demand than supply at this point. So the situation has improved a lot over the past few years. I started to come here since in 2008, so quite a few years. And the situation is much better, but still much more demand than real quality supply. And of course, there are examples kind of underlining of what I'm saying. So there is great opportunity for those who think long-term in a market like ourselves, for finding the right type of entrepreneurs and right type of companies, both local champions and also global challengers from the Turkish market.
Sina?
One thing to add, I think the structure is going into the right direction. So what I see is all the early stage investments are made by either Turkish business angels or Turkish VCs, the angels early stages. So the two gentlemen after us have, I would say, 40 out of the last 50 early stage investments. But all the late stage investments, like Burda in investing into Lidiana, are done by the foreign, strategic partners or VCs. I think that's the right direction. In 2 years from now, we will see much more late stage investments of Turks, but also sizable early stage investments of the European or American funds.
Interesting. Jozsef, I know your fund focuses almost exclusively on Europe and Eastern Europe. How does the ecosystem here in Turkey compare to some of the other places you guys are spending your time, whether it's Budapest or Warsaw or places like that?
Yeah, I think the ecosystem is in certain parts much more developed, in certain parts less developed. The less developed part we already talked about. It's simply the demand is higher than the supply, clearly. So less investors still, various Accel people, I have been seeing them at various events for years and years, still haven't done anything because, for obvious reasons, but they still haven't done anything. So the supply is greater than the demand. So there is a lot to develop there. On the other part of the ecosystem, the quality of advisors, and first and foremost, the quality of entrepreneurs it's really great. I see, and we see a lot of great entrepreneurs having local background, having US background, having German backgrounds, and coming back and doing business. So that part of the ecosystem, the quality of entrepreneurship has improved a lot over the past few years, and that's great because ultimately we all are in the HR business, finding the right people to back with money, and that's here. It is not worse at all than any other place in the world.
Yeah, I think the idea that this really is, at the end of the day, a people business, right? And you invest in people and in founders is certainly something we hear a lot in Silicon Valley, but I think that's globally true for this business. Just quickly on this side, how do you guys compare the world and the ecosystem of entrepreneurship here in Turkey versus, say, your hometowns, London and Berlin?
Compare the quality of the ecosystem, is that what I said?
Sure, I guess.
I think, so what we see like all around Europe is that, what I said before, that like e-commerce, but it was also, I think what is changing right now is that there is a big wave of entrepreneurs who have had a local success, so let's say a Polish success, a Czech success, a German, or maybe a Turkish, and like the next stage for them is to have a kind of regional or international success. So I think there's a lot of, or a substantial number of experienced people, but still hungry people. Huh? So if I think like in bigger countries, like in the US, probably you have one big success and maybe you're not that hungry anymore because the exit has been huge and stuff. And here there is many people with a kind of mid-sized success that still leaves a lot of room for their ambition to still drive them forward. And I think I see that in lots of Eastern European countries, and I would suspect that it's also the case in Turkey.
Yeah, for me, Turkey is in an interesting position, and I think Turkey should become Sweden.
Should become Sweden.
Should become Sweden.
Okay,
and let me explain
tell us more about that.
So the way I see it is, sitting on our perch in London, from all over Europe, places like Budapest, places like Vilnius or Barcelona, you see local entrepreneurs kind of move to London and then become part of the ecosystem, or similarly come to Berlin and build something up and try to kind of build a global company. If you look at Swedish companies, they have the Israeli model with a strong local home market. So in the Israeli model, you develop a smart technology and you go to the US day one. In the Swedish model, you figure something out, you test it out in the Nordics market, but you know the Nordics market isn't so big. You've had successful entrepreneurs in the past, like Spotify, like Klarna, who've gone internationally, so you have big global ambition. So after figuring out how to do it at home, you jump to the US or you jump to pan-European, and you're very successful. I think the nice thing about Turkey is entrepreneurs don't go away and all move to Berlin or London. There's really a big pool for being in the Turkish market because the market is so excited, it's so young, it's growing fast, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of white spaces. But if you combine that, the early success in the local market, figuring it out, honing the product and the service, and then jump internationally, that's where you have the best of both worlds. And I think right now, a lot of Turkish entrepreneurs kind of get stuck in the first phase.
Got it. Well, I know we have just about 5 minutes left, so I'll kind of do a speed round of some questions for you guys. One thing I'm sure a lot of the entrepreneurs in the audience are wondering is, what is the best way to start a relationship or start a conversation with a VC, right? And one of the tactics is to tackle them when they come off of stage right now, but that's not always the best tactic. So, for you guys, what gets your attention, when you're just first meeting somebody or meeting an entrepreneur?
So I think these days, VCs try to be very public, so it's you know, we blog, we're on Twitter, and
yep.
And
you're on stage right now.
We're on stage right now, but I think there is many ways in which you can approach VCs, and I think, from my experience, the most effective and the most sensible way to do it is to do some background research on the VC to really figure out whether he actually is interested in the kind of stuff that you are doing, and then in the initial meeting provide some context for, you know, hey, I'm doing that, and I think you're interested in this because X, Y, Z. And then I think it creates a spark and leads to a deeper conversation, or it immediately doesn't because they're saying, okay, that's not the field I'm interested in. So I think reaching out is easy, doing some research before that helps.
Yep, so you can kind of personalize and customize the approach.
Because VCs are like, I think many things I might be interested in will not be interested for you, and maybe otherwise, right? So it's also, you know, saving people's time if they do some reading, and many don't. So, you know, and VCs can be very different animals. Yeah.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I agree with all you say. First of all, it's my job to find you, so if you come to me, you make my job easier, so I'm very grateful for that. But I think another thing is very important, especially here in Turkey. We know a lot of people like Sina, so if you know some of the local angels or former entrepreneurs, etc., if you know them well, you can ask them, hey, introduce me to a couple of good VCs. That's a very a quick way into our door and to be noticed.
Sure. How about you guys?
I think I'm the easiest. You don't need to have any research. You just contact me, and then I get back to you. I listen to your story. If I understand it in the first 3 minutes, then we continue. Otherwise, it doesn't continue.
Got it.
Yeah, well, we are not as easy as Sina, but becoming on the way. As I said, we are opening up our Istanbul office. We have a great guy on the ground now, Elbrus. Reach out to us, either to him or to myself, or both of us, as early as you can. It doesn't matter. We are not going to invest maybe in you now, but we start building a relationship. We meet today, we maybe make a deal in 3 years, but we have to start it somehow. So just reach out, don't worry.
So Sina noted the next folks to come up on stage will actually be some of the most impressive and active local investors here in Turkey. So I'll kind of bring this one to a close, picking up on Pawel's idea that, you know, there is kind of sometimes expertise to be gained coming in from the outside. So as folks coming in from other places, or locals who've had success in other places, what advice would you guys give to entrepreneurs who someday think they want to build a company that will need venture capital, right? So one of the things I've heard a lot in Silicon Valley that I like is this idea that, you know, investors like to invest in lines, not dots, right? So I think that one is a good one, because it's sort of this idea that, you know, you have to build a relationship over time, not just something that shows up once, right? The other version of that is they want to invest in the movie, not the picture, right, or the snapshot. But have you guys heard a really good sort of piece of wisdom or advice for entrepreneurs about the process of raising capital over the years that you want to share with the audience? Anybody starting on this side?
Yeah, I would just say one thing. Build a great team. Build a great team. You know, you are great yourself, of course, we all know that. But find the right people to team up with. So that will be very helpful when raising capital.
I think you don't get money for your visions or for your dreams, so execute well, under-promise, over-perform. It's the most sustainable way to get more and more money from any investor in the world.
I think I would turn it around and I would say, like, if you go and if you want to go this path of raising VC money for your company, I think it's very, very important from your point of view to really get to know the people at the firm that will be investing in your company, because it is a very long-term relationship. It's probably harder to finish it than to finish a marriage, right? You will be spending a lot of time with those people, so better make sure that the people who invest in your company are the people you want to work with, because you don't want to be stuck with people you don't like.
Yeah, two things. One, your best investor is your customer, so getting money from the market is always better than getting money from an investor. And two, in a market as young as Turkey, I would make sure you're really well informed about what is norm in terms of investment documents and get it transparent. Fortunately, there's a lot of good books and a lot of kind of good writing about it, but yeah, transparent, open, honest investment documents is really important.
Great. Well, with that, I think what I'm going to do is ask the audience to join me in thanking our panelists for being here. So give them a round of applause.